What is up, YouTube? Jason here. I'm back today with more of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. What I wanted to talk about today was a quote I found interesting that also somewhat applies to life today, right? Contemporary society, and how it is somewhat structured around convenience. So in part 6, chapter 2, during Porfiry Petrovich's second interview, if you will, of Raskolnikov, he is building up. He's trying to obviously have this sort of banter, but it's almost like a friendly throwing of jabs, if you will. A tit for tat, or whatever you would categorize it as. But this he's trying to build this rapport with Raskolnikov, and he's trying to set him at ease by issuing him an apology for how their first meeting ended and how they were interrupted by Nikolay. And it seems as though he is, he's showing Raskolnikov's his opinion and his psychological analysis of Nikolay. And, theorizing if Nikolay were the murderer, what his motives would have been. And it seems as though he's going in the direction of, oh, yes, Nikolay has confessed it, obviously, so it's like, okay, Nikolay is the murderer. But then the tables are turned. And he starts painting the picture that this is what the murderer does, and this is how they act. And it is evident that Raskolnikov is back in the crosshairs of Porfiry Petrovich, back in Porfiry's crosshairs, right? So I will read the quote, and this is a quote that comes from Porfiry, spoken by Porfiry, and he is trying to get behind he's trying to explain a possible motive behind Raskolnikov's double homicide, right? So Porfiry says, "Blood renews when comfort is preached as the aim of life." Okay? And I got in a discussion with one of my friends, a few people, two of my friends really, about comfort and how it can be sometimes excessive comfort, at least, can act as more of a detriment than a positive thing, or something we should always seek. And also, this is me simply analyzing this quote, right? So I am going to read you my sort of analysis of the quote, how first of all, how it perhaps applies to today's society and the time here and now. And then we will jump back into crime and punishment, and I'll discuss how the quote potentially applies to Raskolnikov, and I will just cover some things that I have recently read and points that I'd like to make. So yes, reading the quote one more time. "Blood renews when comfort is preached as the aim of life. Comfort is a vice like all other empty grasps towards instant gratification. It does nothing to test character nor refine it. In modern society, we focus on maximizing convenience and pleasure. We dispense with the idea of suffering for a higher purpose because it directly contradicts the primary mechanisms that keep lymph circulating in our blood and lard cushioning our ass. As a result, the soul is stretched thin and personality becomes shallow. Society on the whole is too morally bankrupt and or stupid to see a problem with exchanging their freedom with a free Big Mac following each 10th purchase made through the designated app. We live for comfort, but secretly yearn for struggle. The greatest tales ever told and best books ever written vanish without a discernible conflict for the protagonist to vanquish. There's a good reason Willy Wonka doesn't leave the chocolate factory to Veruca Salt nor Augustus Gloop. The taller the hurdle the main character must tackle, the louder the audience applauds at the end. Great art depicts character developed through suffering's oscillating tide. Therefore, among a society that preaches comfort as the aim of life, bloodshed offers, somewhat of an ironic renewal, right? Or it's ironic that bloodshed offers renewal when comfort is sort of the aim of life, because violence would be the antithesis of comfort, I guess. Or the opposite of comfort. Anyway, therefore, among a society that preaches comfort as the aim of life, bloodshed offers renewal because it marks a painful awakening to and denouncing of the detrimental effects brought upon by hedonism. Excessive comfort renders the soul stagnant, requiring a strong kick in the nuts to act as a jump start. We're rewarded for sinking deeper into the mire, slipping further into the void. But oblivion is only comfortable for those who wish to be made numb and remain ignorant. Okay? So now I'm going to get into Raskolnikov, right? And back into Crime and Punishment, and perhaps how this quote relates to Raskolnikov's motive. And perhaps what went wrong with Raskolnikov. Obviously, what he believes perhaps went right, or I don't know. Okay, so the malaise that plagues Raskolnikov in the beginning of the novel arises from the sense that the suffering he endures is not his own. Going the traditional route and conforming to societal expectations not only inflicts cynicism in Raskolnikov, but infects him with a case of imposter syndrome as well. Desire is perpendicular to reality, resulting in a swell of self-hatred that requires condemnation and atonement. That is to say, desire is not parallel with the reality that Raskolnikov lives, right? Is not parallel to Raskolnikov's reality. So there's a inner feeling of one being a hypocrite, or an inner contradiction that's causing this great fissure, great inner turmoil in Raskolnikov. So desire is perpendicular to reality, obviously, when it should be parallel, resulting in a swell of self-hatred that requires condemnation and atonement. Perhaps Raskolnikov felt the comfort promised by walking the traditional route meant he too must become accustomed to feeling fraudulent and melancholy. A pernicious course that ties the noose decades before slipping one's neck through the loop. Murdering the pawnbroker affords Raskolnikov with the opportunity to plunge headfirst into the unknown, a test there is no turning back from that will decide once and for all where he falls on the spectrum of extraordinary men. This is why, when confessing to Sonia, Raskolnikov states, "I murdered myself, not her. I crushed myself once and for all, forever. But it was the devil that killed that old woman, not I." He's bludgeoned the man he once was, meticulously selected a victim that mirrored something he despised about himself, and where her flesh, her disposition failed to align with his own, Raskolnikov made up for this by projecting the remainder of his self-image onto her. And while the extraordinary man theory played a role in contributing to a possible motive for committing the murder, the reader can't help but think Raskolnikov already knew what the results would be. Not only is Raskolnikov bogged down by guilt and shame during the planning and preparation stage, but he remains indecisive until he overhears Lisaveta state, at such and such time and date, she'll be away from the apartment. Raskolnikov recounts later, during his confession to Sonia, later during his confession to Sonia, Raskolnikov recounts how he had pondered if Napoleon would murder the old hag, should she be the person standing between him and obtaining absolute power. The answer Raskolnikov comes up with is that Napoleon would have strangled her in a minute without thinking about it. This is very telling because the two men couldn't be more different in their unique approach to spilling blood. Napoleon wouldn't feel an ounce of guilt for either woman, let alone pay them a second, third, and fourth thought following the murders. Ambition, along with his right to power, would vindicate him completely from any wrongdoing. Should he later detail the homicide, the language he would use would be joyous and triumphant. Not full of paranoia and guilt and grief, as sort of Raskolnikov recounts the murder. Also, you don't imagine Napoleon would have to come up with this grand theory, or use this grand theory, rather, to justify to justify his murderous actions, right? It would be justified on the basis of his right to power, like his inherent right to power. So Raskolnikov couldn't be more different. He's far too sensitive and critical to clutch on the conductor's baton for a substantial amount of time, like the conductor of a symphony. How they have a baton that they conduct the orchestra with. He couldn't clutch onto this baton for any substantial amount of time. He couldn't seize power for any substantial amount of time. Therefore, if Raskolnikov knows this beforehand, or at least has an inkling that he is not the man, he is not a Napoleon, right? If he has an inkling of this beforehand and understands whereabout he falls in accordance with his own theory, why try his odds at a losing game? For the answer, we need look no further than what he tells Sonia when confessing to her. Raskolnikov states, "I saw it clear as daylight. How strange it is that not a single person living in this mad world has had the daring to go straight for it all and send it flying to the devil. I wanted to have the daring, and I killed her. In the tempest of confusion and doubt, bloodshed offered clarity and definitive proof of self-worth. Consequence was overshadowed by passion. Time stood still on daring's steep and narrow precipice. A train arrived at the station of opportunity, and all eyes anxiously awaited Raskolnikov's decision of whether to board with courage or bow out by cowardice." Obviously, in reality, there is no audience that is watching the murder, besides the removed audience of the reader. But in this fictional landscape, in the setting, there is no audience. Only the audience is in Raskolnikov's mind. And you'd imagine in isolation, he's living he's theorizing, and he's living this rich fantasy life. He's fantasizing, and it clearly drives him to fanaticism, to extremism. But you imagine he has an audience of extraordinary men sat front and center, awaiting to see if even but for a moment he is one of them or not. And his actions will dictate whether they applaud, at the end of this story, or whether they will hang their head in sort of shame and cringe at his cowardice, and perhaps laugh at him, right? So that is the end of what I have written. It's about Raskolnikov. He's not worried about the consequences. It's really time is standing still for a moment in time on daring's steep and narrow precipice. Does he dare to pick up this power, and even if he can only wield it, wield the reins, wield the axe of power for a moment, right? Still, if he can manage to do this, does this, and perhaps yes, like he feels as though this puts him on the same level as Napoleon, as other great leaders who were able to transgress moral law, for their beliefs and their inherent right to the throne and to power. Right, like I said, the consequences are sort of rendered irrelevant by, his passion to go outside of the norm, outside of expectations, and to make this decisive action once and for all that will tell him in a moment whether he is Napoleon-esque, or he could be Napoleon-esque for a moment in time or not. Okay, as Raskolnikov, I found this interesting. As Raskolnikov put it when confessing to Sonia, he killed himself in that old woman, but he fails to mention Lizaveta, right? He ascribes all his unsavory qualities onto the pawnbroker, onto Alyona. And perhaps her unscrupulous nature, there's something he sees in her that perhaps maybe it reminds him of himself, or perhaps she's just an easy target to offload this resentment he feels towards the world and towards perhaps himself. And, so it's sort of this misdirected anger that she is the victim of. And misdirected violence. Anyway, but he fails to mention Lizaveta and what she represents. So if Alyona represents these unsavory, unbecoming qualities, what does Lizaveta represent? Well, she's childlike. Raskolnikov is still very much a young man. We think of, especially when you turn 30, when you turn 40, you think of yourself at 19, at 20, at 21. You almost view your former self, your past self, as a child. You're obviously not a child, but it's almost as if you're looking upon a child when you are that age, when you were that age, right? And your brain's still not fully developed, and you still possess a certain level of innocence and naivety that maybe you don't have as much of, or if at all, when you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s or any time later in life. That's quite later in life. So, yes, and this is really a great showcase of great writing by Dostoevsky, right? Not only Raskolnikov anticipated in killing himself in that room, killing the negative qualities in himself by ascribing them to Alyona. But what he didn't count on, what his passion didn't account for, was he was killing all his potential for good and his innocence and whatever else positive Lizaveta represented. So, very much a dichotomy, in the two women. Sort of the opposite, the antithesis of one another. And Raskolnikov kills them both. And it's very fitting for the story when we think of it like, as a metaphor or, metaphorically. So yeah, it's just great writing, great narrative techniques, used to push the story along, but also in a thought-provoking way, where everything sort of comes full circle. Or, the story allows you to have a full circle analysis of it. So it's quite beautifully written in that aspect. And so what else do we have? And in that you have, like I said, this sort of yin and yang, this dichotomy that the sisters represent. You also have that, and maybe more so like in allegorical terms, with during Raskolnikov's initial confession to Sonia representing almost a Christ-like figure. Of course, she is not without sin. She is a prostitute, but she's totally selfless. She is selling herself for the betterment of her family. Marmeladov, who is drunk and without work, and Katerina, right? The mother, Sonia's stepmother, and who has recently died, as I've been reading more. Anyway, and in the end, she marches her children out onto the street, and they're singing, and they're crying. She's crying that they've been mistreated, and look at this example of, good, well-to-do, well-bred children, how they can sink to such lowliness and such like an abhorrent sight, and she's crying on anybody who will listen, and really any person of importance who will listen. But anyway, so Svidrigailov obviously is eavesdropping, another narrative technique that is used, that is introduced, that allows Raskolnikov to be confessing to both God almost, but then also to the devil. So, if you think of Sonia in allegorical terms representing being a Christ-like figure, and, she's the one who gives Raskolnikov the cross and says, put this on, or better yet, I will put the cross on you when you go to meet your suffering. So he confesses to her and the embodiment of Christ. And then alternatively, he confesses to Svidrigailov, who is eavesdropping and who is sort of an embodiment of psychopathy and really of the devil, right? He has no remorse for his role in his wife's death. And, he, and the role he played in Dunya sort of walking into Luzin's arms, and yeah, just everything that he's done, right? So, and just having no empathy, like I said, for the role that he's played in his wife's untimely passing. So yeah, it's just very interesting how Raskolnikov confesses to both. Yet again, brilliant writing on Dostoevsky's part. So, what Porfiry, during their second meeting, calls this a crime, calls Raskolnikov's murder a crime of aberration. Aberration is sort of, I guess, like doing something that's totally unexpected and which oftentimes is looked down upon. Breaking from what's expected, breaking away from societal norms and customs, and sometimes this is looked down upon. So perhaps like anomaly almost. But yeah, Raskolnikov certainly feels a indignation and for the circumstances he has been thrust into. And this, like I said, this suffering does not feel as if it's his own. This is not his fight to bleed over and to worry himself over. He's really doing, before the murder, he's in school and he's doing all this out of sort of necessity and just out of the way the wind has, he's went the direction, like he's just par for the course, he's went the way the wind has blew him. And so, like I said, this is not his struggle to suffer over. So he casts it off, and he casts it off, and changes his course abruptly through this double homicide. And of course, he has his theories, in his extraordinary man theory, to try to justify it. But that's then why he tells us during his confession to Sonia, perhaps I couldn't accept the fact that I'm just base and envious, and sullen, etc. And perhaps that's really why, the murder, why I committed the murders. But yeah, it's just a total casting off of societal expectations and a total display of indignation and sort of resignation from his expected course. And then, of course, there is, so what is is there atonement and possible redemption for Raskolnikov? Well, it's clear that Porfiry, Zvidrigalov, and Sonia tell him, in one way or another, you need fresh air, you need to go and confess to not just one person, you need to confess to everyone. And in confessing to everyone, I'm trying to wait for the wind to die down. Oh my. So yeah, in confessing to, the authorities, he's in a way confessed to everyone, and he has made himself known. And this is the first step, admitting who he is and what he has done is the first step on the road to redemption and a possible absolving of his sins, right? And this will, simultaneously give him the fresh air that he so needs, right? That he so, whether he realizes or not, desires, that Porfiry and Zvidrigalov tell him that he needs. There is a mental confinement that he has been plagued by since committing the homicide. Paranoia, like I said, the tempest of paranoia, guilt, just this inner turmoil that has sort of swelled up inside of him since committing the murder. The fear of getting caught, right? Does he even feel guilty, or is the fear of getting caught, the anticipation, just too much to handle, that it's causing, just such this nervous agitation to build, to well up inside of him? Obviously almost driving him to commit suicide at one point. But then that lady commits suicide instead of Raskolnikov on the bridge, or jumps into the canal, I believe. But anyway, so yes, going and meeting his suffering, going and confessing to the authorities, and thereby confessing to everyone, will allot him the fresh air that he so needs, and will grant him life once more. What's interesting is Porfiry tells Raskolnikov, you have much life to live. You don't know what's in store for you. And while Porfiry says, I'm not always telling the truth, and I don't always perhaps know what's best, or something along those lines, But it seems as though he's being sincere. And when he tells Raskolnikov that he likes Raskolnikov, I think he is being sincere. Of course, he has a job to do. Of course, Porfiry is a master artisan. He is a master of the craft of interrogation. He uses psychology he weaponizes psychology. He weaponizes Raskolnikov's psychology and uses it to his advantage, knowing that Raskolnikov's psychology will not allow him to evade capture forever, nor the authorities forever, and Raskolnikov in time will give himself up because of these negative emotions, paranoia, guilt, etc., as I mentioned, nervous agitation, that they will work against Raskolnikov and he will turn himself in. He will confess because of them. And Porfiry tells Raskolnikov, he guesses that he will not know an hour beforehand that he is going to confess. But in the end, Raskolnikov will confess. And it's funny, Raskolnikov's like, this isn't a confession. Know right now that I am not confessing to you. But I think Raskolnikov knows deep down, he's taking his couple more days. Porfiry tells him, it's so beautifully written, like, I'll give you 2 more days. They both know. These are men who both know. Porfiry knows as well as Raskolnikov, even though Raskolnikov, because in their second meeting, there's no beating around the bush, or no, he's not implying anything, right? Or there's no hints, right? I should say, at the fact that he believes Raskolnikov to be the murderer. There's a direct accusation. And you can tell just based on Raskolnikov's reaction to that. He jumps up and he has all this nervous energy sort of just comes to a head. He jumps up, but immediately he has nowhere to go, so he just sits right back down. And that's really a manifestation. That is like the physical manifestation of of this nervous energy that Raskolnikov feels on full display. Instead of having getting it articulated to us and having it sort of spelled out, you get to witness it right before you, how this nervous agitation and fear of getting caught is affecting him. Obviously we see him sick, but it's just on full display, the action of it, I should say, instead of it being articulated or spoken to us with words, broken down in words. You see a physical action of Raskolnikov leaping up from his chair and sitting right back down, having nowhere to go. So he has all this energy bubbling up, all this nervous energy bubbling up with nowhere to go. And that is just obviously eating and wasting away at his soul and his character. But yeah, it's very much like the murder. Raskolnikov didn't know he was going to commit the murder. He was so on the fence about it, whether to do it or whether not to do it. But of course, Lizaveta, as I say, is sort of this train of opportunity, ringing out, whistling out that it's entering the station, and he has this one opportunity to board and to, take this information that Lizaveta is going to, what he thinks is going to be gone from the apartment, or he can let this opportunity pass by, and he may never get another opportunity, or, he may be, circumstances may bring him to his senses, or just, not afford him with another opportunity to go through with, commit the perfect murder. So not knowing, he doesn't know he's going to commit the murder until he hears that she's going to be gone. And just like the murder, he won't know that he's going to confess until the very last moment, and something will drive him to confession. He is full of this passionate intensity. that that sort of bubbles up inside of him, and eventually, with nowhere to go, perhaps leads to some rash, irrational decisions. But who's not at least a little bit like Raskolnikov, I guess, in that aspect. I certainly, not violent, but I mean just keeping, letting resentment build up, and how it can negatively affect you, and a tendency, sometimes towards alienating myself, or, isolating yourself. And anyway, so yeah, I filmed this in the cemetery. I can't think of a better place than to discuss the double homicide of the fictional double homicide of a pawnbroker and her sister. I just wanted to get this recorded, and hopefully you guys, if anybody would like to, of course, chime in the comments. And I'm very nearing the end of Crime and Punishment. I'm on the final part 6, chapter 3, maybe. I don't have it marked. I'd have to look. So all I have is the rest of, I've got less than 100 pages to go. And, of course, the, less than 100 pages to go. And and the epilogue. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word epilogue. So I was like, preface. What's the ending called? Epilogue. So less than 100 pages to go in the epilogue. Look out for more of my videos in the future. But thank you guys. I'll see you later.